mother is a Webster, and the Webster family goes back to, in Harford County, about pre-revolutionary, and my father's family also, the Castley, that's the Castley name. He's also Archers and a few other names, so they go back pre-revolution as well. So we've been here, my family's been here for well over 200 years.
The oldest ancestor that I have came to Harford County in the early 1700s, and that was William Amos. His son, William Amos II, was the founder of the Little Falls Friends Meeting in Fallston. And the Harlan side of my family came to America in 1687 at the invitation of William Penn. One of the Harlan ancestors came to Maryland in the early 1800s and married Hannah Amos. So I have a long history of Quakers in my family genealogy.
My family came over from the Eastern Shore in the early 1800s. They were tenant farmers in the Lapham area.
My roots are very deep in Harford County and in the Jarrettsville area. My earliest Jarrett ancestor arrived in 1721 and on down through the line ended up with the property. The Jarrett family had the property that is now the Harford Hunt Club property. And Luther Jarrett, of course, came to Jarrettsville and to the village of Carmen, and in those days, when he was postmaster, changed the name to Jarrettsville and has remained ever since.
So I am seventh generation on my O'Neill side, which is the paternal side of my family. My great-great-grandfather was an officer in the Confederate Army, and he lived in Havdegrass on Strawberry Lane. My grandfather's name was Howard O'Neill. He was a state senator. His portrait hangs in the Bel Air Courthouse. His wife was Madeline Robinson, and her father was Attorney General for the state of Maryland.
All four branches of my family have roots in Harford County. My maternal and paternal grandmothers both were part of a migration from the south, the mountains of North Carolina, and they came to Harford County with a whole sort of group of other people from the Virginia, North Carolina region.
My family lives on property that was originally owned by my great-grandmother, and then she passed land down to my grandmother, and then my grandmother gave land to both daughters. So my aunt, my mom, and I all live in a row in Darlington on property that's been woman-owned in our family since the early 1920s.
My great-great-grandparents lived on Schuster Road, and their last name was Schuster. So this is a road that I take every day on my commute, so there's that connection. My father was a state trooper, and he worked at Barracks D in Benson. And then my mother was actually the first jury commissioner in Harford County.
So I grew up in Harford County. I attended Aberdeen High School and graduated from there. But my family has been in Harford County for a number of years. My father was a graduate of the Havre Grace Color School, a class of 1949, which is why I'm associated with the school today.
My husband and I, he grew up in Norrisville, and his family, our dads were actually next door neighbors. And they grew up in Jarrettsville playing baseball in the fields and things like that and running around and just having a great time.
So I have been here since 2005. My husband and I moved here when we retired from the Finger Lakes area of Western New York. And the reason we moved here is because our daughter moved here, and she's our only child. And so it was very easy for us to decide where we were going to retire.
My family actually came to Harford County from Baltimore, and before that they came in through Ellis Island. But they ultimately lived over at Abingdon Road and Route 7. My grandfather rented a house over there, and he had many children, and he wanted something more for his children, his growing children.
Harford County was actually a leading component of the canned tomato and corn industry of the late 19th, early 20th centuries. Big parts of the southeastern part of the county were agricultural, but big part of the sort of canned food industry was real big around here, and that was a new technology at the time, particularly in the 19th century.
Yeah, my father was a member of the Fallston Farmers Club, and it was founded in 1884, and 5 generations of my family have been members of that club, and it was a club that met. It's one of the oldest farmers clubs, and there were a number of them throughout the state of Maryland, but it was one of the oldest in the state.
We got into no-till farming in the 60s or the 70s. We were early getting into it for everybody else because we had to, and we knew, the most valuable resource you got is your own crop ground. But I can see a lot of new greenhouses, and a lot of people are doing the farm to table at their farms with the cheese and the butter. And that's really taken off, and it's doing a great job. And the farmers that are going that route with the younger generation, they're doing a good job at it.
So back in 1842, and we're celebrating 180 years this year, along with the county celebrating its 250 years. A bunch of business owners and farm owners banded together right in Bel Air and decided that they needed to mitigate their fire risks. And they formed a mutual insurance company, and we actually started operating right out of the courthouse in some available space with the clerk.
But it was really in the 20th century, I think, with the military as the catalyst that helped Harford County through Aberdeen Proving Ground become kind of a center for innovation, developing weapons and dealing with the challenges of the 2 world wars and then the Cold War. So the military, the Army in Harford County has been kind of a center of innovation, and then after 9/11 becomes Aberdeen's, APG sort of turns around to become a center for cybersecurity and counterterrorism.
For a long time, Aberdeen Proving Ground and Edgewood Arsenal were just nice little farms and sleepy villages, and they yielded the M1 Abrams tank and the artillery that was successful in World War I and II, and so many other developments.
In 1988, I'd been in Baltimore, New York radio, and had the opportunity to build a radio station in Harford County. So myself and 2 other partners found a frequency, happened to be in Haverty Grace. We literally had to put up a tower and build offices and studios and the whole shebang, because all we had was a piece of paper that had the 1037 frequency. So in March of '89, we got on the air, WXCY, it's a country station.
For the last 3 or 4 years, we've been really active in restoring the shoreline of the city of Harford Grace as it sits on the Susquehanna River and the Chesapeake Bay. And what that means is we're getting rid of all the hard shoreline, which is concrete blocks and broken down wooden bulkheads, and we completely have made beaches and beachfront all along Water Street, going all the way through the city down to the Congo Point Lighthouse. And this is a groundbreaking, innovative way. We've had people from as far away as Japan come to the city of Harford Grace to study what we're doing with our shoreline.
Well, WHFC has been around for 40 years. Okay, it started as a student club, and then in '83, it got serious. And so we evolved from '83, where there was a lot of student involvement, to a more professional lineup. And this is probably around 1999, 2000. So we continued to grow, and then what we did is we created a student learning lab, and that was going to be the central point that we were going to develop the new WHFC around.
Change is part of our life. Change will always be there. It's important that we respect our heritage, hold on to what's the best of it, and move forward. But the realization that change is all around us, and we have to meet what the world throws at us. So we're going to do that.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy 250th anniversary, Harford County.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, 250th to Harford County.
Happy birthday, Harford County.
On behalf of my city and the great citizens of Harford Grace, I want to wish Harford County a happy 250th anniversary, and we're looking forward to the next 250 years.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, Harford County, 250th.
When I was born was when 95 was being built. So my family farm quickly gave way to Route 95 coming through. So I'm a transition baby because we saw I lived that where we were a farming family, and the next thing you know, you've got a 8-lane highway coming through the middle of your farm and totally obliterates it. So I appreciate the force of change and being the middle of 11 children. I kind of understand about trying to pull things together in the midst of a lot of change.
But Harford County, from kind of a developmental phase, was really more like I would say an Eastern Shore kind of rural county until about the 1960s or 70s, and at that point, Harford County becomes much more developed and much more part of the greater Baltimore, Washington area. And then we see a kind of rapid growth, suburban growth, and big sections that were formerly rural, especially around Bel Air, parts of Aberdeen, become developed. And Harford County's character really changes a lot in those years.
I am keenly aware of the growth. I have, however, been a part of that growth. I have shepherded many people into the community. And my dad famously said when he was on a county commissioner and someone was complaining about a new subdivision, and he looked at them and he said, "If I felt the way that you do, you wouldn't be here now, because my people were here long before you arrived. So instead, let us work together. Let us share this wealth and let us share this wonderful place."
But I do think it's important that folks appreciate that this county has always been about incredible change, from a sleepy little hamlet to, for a while the Conowingo Dam was the engineering marvel of the world, built right here on the Conowingo, on the Susquehanna River.
Looking past what Harford County was and then what it is today, I think it tells us, a little bit about, who folks were and who we were and how we can learn from our past experiences and move forward as a society.
So the African Grace Colored School was first established in 1912. It was actually built by the community. It was a grammar school for African American children. It was one about 14 in the county.
I'm project director for something we call the Harford Civil Rights Project here at the college, and that has explored the 20th century African American civil rights movement as it played out in Harford County. So it's not as well known as maybe some other stories, the big national stories, but there was a big movement here to desegregate the schools. There was a freedom ride that actually came right through on Route 40 in 1961. There was a major movement to desegregate housing, and there were efforts to register voters and get people more involved in politics.
The Hosanna School, it was established expressly to educate the black population. Now, the school, of course, had all ages because people were eager to learn how to read, all ages, because it had been illegal for us to learn. So it was not uncommon to have students who were 7, 8, 9, 10 in the same classroom with those who were 40, 50, and 60.
It took a lot of lawsuits, and one in which, in fact, Thurgood Marshall was involved, and the NAACP's Legal Defense Fund and others, to desegregate. It was a successful story eventually because of the parents and the students and eventually teachers that were really very persistent, often at great risk to their careers and their reputations. And
so I started the Commission for Women in the 70s because it was mandated by the government. I had 15 really top-notch people with me on the commission, but it was a case of we had no office, we had no telephone, we had nothing. I became the superintendent of a county agency from my kitchen, where I'm answering the rape crisis and battered spouse phone and administering our chairperson.
I think it's so important to understand where we came from and all the strides we made in order to get where we are today.
1934 was during the Depression, and I think times were tough at that time, but We were fairly fortunate because the farm had been in the family owned by the family for a number of generations, and we had our own food, so there was not a lot of hardship during that time.
Havre de Grace had to quickly, in the 1800s, become a town where everybody just lived, and everyone had to learn how to live together. Little pockets of, the Little Italy part of Havre de Grace, with the fishermen and the blue-collar people and the factory owners who were more wealthier, but we all lived in the same town in the 1800s and the 1900s.
The people have changed over time. Certainly the Indians were first, and then the European settlers, and then we saw wave upon wave of Irish immigrants. Well, slavery certainly, the slaves and the Irish immigrants, the Italian immigrants, the Hispanic immigrants more recently. It's really shaped us in an incredible fashion.
We've gone through many calamities in the world. A lot of people think, oh, we just went through this pandemic. We went through a pandemic already. We've been through every world war. We've been through the Civil War. And so we've been here and for our policyholders all that time.
The fire service goes back to the mid-1800s, around the 1850s. That started the fire service here in Harford County. It has grown to 12 departments throughout the county and about 3,000 volunteers that continue to volunteer day in and day out. I grew up in Havre de Grace, lived in Havre de Grace, spent most of the time, my father, my uncles, my brother, and all of us, we were firefighters. And we spent time in the fire service in the Susquehanna Hose Company in Havre de Grace. And I've got almost 50 years in the fire service now.
EMT, it started back in the 1800s, and it's been a big help for taking care of the citizens of Harford County, car accidents, fires in the homes, just been sick in the house, to help transport them to the hospital, pregnancies, respiratory distress calls and stuff. The EMTs was there for the families.
Our fire company does Food Truck Tuesday nights and bingos, and we really push that as a community to try to get everyone out. During the pandemic, the food trucks were a weekly event where people could get together safely and eat and see each other at a distance.
One of the greatest things that we do throughout the year is we support Band Together, which is an association that provides instruments for students who are in need. And every October, Vagabond Sandwich Company in the community has an event where they get donations for that group, and we perform at that event. And so there's a lot of businesses in the community who help each other and keep all the little groups alive and the small businesses as well.
I'm a volunteer kind of person, and so I first started volunteering at the library, so I met some wonderful people, the Friends of the Library group, and helped out with a lot of fun activities there. I do a lot of outreach. Through SARC, I volunteer with the Spousal Abuse Sexual Assault Resource Center.
I've spent my entire life on boards. I'm on the Farm Fair, I'm on this committee for the 250th celebration, I was on the committee for the 200th celebration, yes, I'm that old, and I've been working, I was in 4-H, I was in the high school theater groups, I was in community theater, and it's just because that's what you do. And I think that being part of the history of a community gives you that much more of a natural inclination to just do and be a part of a community because you have the history and you can share it and you can welcome other people into that experience.
I had a stroke in 2007, have aphasia, so after my stroke, I started a 5K race called Survivor Run. I had that for 13 years. It was a 5K race in Bel Air, and I raised money over $60,000 for several different charities.
I don't think there's any place in Maryland that can equal us in the level of volunteerism. When we look at what we do in our volunteer fire company, our school volunteers, our Parks and Rec volunteers, church volunteers, we're one of the major populations of veterans in the state of Maryland. And so talk about a sense of volunteerism, but it's also the agricultural community that's part of our rich heritage, where farmers, that's part of farming, you reach in and help your neighbor. So that confluence really, I think, builds a strong sense of volunteerism in Harford County, and I think that's something that I look forward to capturing.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy 250th birthday, Harford County.
Happy birthday to you.
Congratulations to the county for 250 years.
Happy birthday, Harford County.
Happy 250th anniversary, Harford County.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, Harford County, 250 years.
And 250 more.
And I found out when I talked to my mom, Lillian Jackson, that her sister, as a teenager, Nanny, had come up to Harford County with other ladies who worked at Edgewood Arsenal looking for a job. So my aunt, she got hired and she worked at the Edgewood Arsenal munitions plant where they made bombs and for the Allies for World War II, and a lot of women worked there. And she was on the assembly line packing grenades, very dangerous. And so this particular day she went to work and she was on her job packing the grenades, and a large explosion, a large boom happened, and she like ducked down on the ground, on the floor rather. And as she was ducking down, a door went flying by off its hinges. And she was like, wow, just missed, being injured or being killed. It was, a lot of women lost their lives when that explosion happened.
We had our jobs to do on the farm, and one of them was to help get in the hay in the summertime. And our job was to drive the truck to get the hay in, and we had a hay loader that was behind the truck. My father would be on the back of the truck distributing the hay so the load would be balanced, and we drove the truck. That was a 1942 Chevrolet with a stick shift, and we all knew that's how we learned to drive.
We lived near North Harford High School, and my father being a state trooper, the kids like to play pranks, and in the summer, this was before air conditioning, we had all our windows opened, and in the middle of the night, the kids would squeal their wheels in front of our house and scare the bejesus out of us. I mean, it was awful. And Dad would get so mad, he actually slept in his patrol car, parked in the parking lot, in the driveway, waiting for them to come by, and then of course he would go after them. Well, this was all fun and games, but it sort of got a little tension when my brother was a senior in high school. The kids like to have, I think they called it senior squealy day or something. They put oil on the hill, and then they would squeal out, and there'd be this beautiful blue smoke, and then my father was the one called up to calm everything down.
All of these schools in Harford County for African Americans, they had hand-me-down books and equipment and things of the schools attended by other kids within the county. So they never had the latest and greatest. But what was great about these schools is that they had teachers and their principals that really cared about them, and they made sure that they were successful. So they taught them how to be successful in life, not just as far as schoolwork is concerned, but in life, because they knew what they were going to go through. So the teachers had experienced the same thing growing up, so they knew what the students needed to do to be successful. And many of them went on to be great success in their personal lives.
We were here the first day The new Harford Mall opened in 1973. As high schoolers at Kennerdale High School, we came down to the Bel Air Main Street Theater every Saturday, and the balcony was reserved just for us. So we spent a lot of time down here.
But the story I want to tell is that my grandfather and his wife, Madeline and Howard O'Neill, came to Harford County as newlyweds in 1913, and they were planning to build their home, and my grandfather had purchased the land, which is now the Harford Mall, which was the Bel Air racetrack, and he was going to build his home there. And his wife, my grandmother O'Neill, famously said, "No, I'm not raising my children that far out of the town of Bel Air." And so he chose instead a location on Williams Street, and built a home there, which is now the Mann House.
There are a lot of really interesting people in my family, particularly, I would say, my grandmother. Barbara Kirchner was her name. She passed last year, sadly, but she had 93 wonderful years on this earth, and she did a lot in that time. She was a realtor for some time in the 80s, I would believe. She traveled always, and she really settled into her music and artistic ability as she reached her, I guess, like middle adulthood is where she really started to go around to local areas and buildings that were maybe starting to fade a little bit, and draw them and etch them and sketch them and send them around. And there's a set of greeting cards that she made herself that I see everywhere.
All of our family were pretty active in the 4-H Club program. We went to a camp at the 4-H Club in Rocks. We also spent a week in the summertime at the University of Maryland for a 4-H Club week, which included children from all over the state of Maryland. And we participated in the county fair and the state fair. My sister Elizabeth showed Jersey cows, and she had a grand champion heifer for a couple of years there. My brother showed pigs, and my sister Mary Ellen and I pretty much stuck to the domestic arts at the fairs.
I would like to walk the Gunpowder Falls State Park trails, especially the railroad trail. I knew there was an old abandoned house just off the trail that had a lot of no trespassing signs, and I didn't know anything about it. But the mountain bikers and the other hikers on the trail encouraged me to go and take a look. So we did. We walked up, and to our surprise, we found low-slung, modern, mid-century modern house built into the ridge above the Gunpowder Falls, the little Gunpowder Falls. And the windows were broken out, the doors were gone, the house was covered in graffiti. It had been known as the Graffiti House, and it was a place I knew that there was a lot of local mischief taking place. But it remained standing somehow. A couple, Rodney and Margie Coates, had lived in this house above the ridge with their 6 children, and the house isn't that big, but they had 6 children. And Rodney worked for Triumph Motorcycles. He was a motorcycle fanatic, an amateur racer. He raced all over the country, won many of his races. And he worked for Triumph in Towson, and that's what brought them here.
One of my stories that I like to recall on occasion is one of our massive snowstorms in the 1940s. That snowstorm hit during the day, and we rode Mr. St. Clair's bus, and he knew that he could not get up Federal Hill Road, at which point they called ahead. My father hooked our team of horses up to the farm sled, and we got the bus. The bus got as far as Grimmel's Farm, if you know where that is from the village in Jarrettsville. And my dad got there with the sled and piled on everybody who was on the bus left, and up the road we went, across the fields, until we got to Federal Hill. And as I recall, Mr. Sam Ford came from the other direction with his sled and team of horses and picked up those that went on up toward Fawn Grove Road, up to that intersection.
My sister and I were very big into 4-H when we were little,
and still are a very big proponent of the Harford County 4-H program. And when I was 12 years old, I won a horse through 4-H. I think it was probably the competition my dad wasn't excited that I won, because then he went ahead, and because we're in Darlington with a little bit of land, it made more sense financially for him to build a fence and a small run-in barn. And it was a public speaking competition and a horsemanship test and then an interview. And the prize was a horse that had been donated. And how many other places would you go somewhere where a kid in a public speaking competition could earn a horse through 4-H? And it's one of the things that it's just so special.
One of the first things that happened to me when I took the job as executive director of the Historical Society, I was there and a collection came in. It was kind of the first time that a collection came in, and they started unpacking it, and I was like, oh, well, this is interesting. You know, this came from a school, and I looked down and I saw a report card and I saw my grandmother's name, Willie Lou Jones, what was her maiden name, and I said, that was my grandmother. You know? and it was such a heartfelt feeling, you know, so it's been wonderful.
Happy birthday to you.
Hey, Terry Troy here, and I want to say a happy anniversary, 250th for Harford County. Enjoy it and make it a great year.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, Harford County, and on for the next 250.
Happy birthday, Harford County.
Happy birthday, Harford County, on the first 250 years, and let's go for another 250 and more.
Happy birthday to you.
I want to wish Harford County a very happy 250 years. It's amazing how time flies. It seems like it was just 200. Happy birthday.
It used to snow a lot, and in '78 we had a blizzard, and I had a milk truck assigned to me that week, and I slept in the truck all week. So I would go from farm to farm, and there's a lot of good biscuits out there. If you show up, there's a lot of good biscuits, better than Cracker Barrel. So I stayed in that a whole week, and finally you'd get a load and you'd go down and you'd transfer it like on 80 road somewhere on a tractor and trailer. But I did have to go to DC one night with a load of milk, so that was real deal. I mean, that was real snow. I mean, you weren't sure exactly where you're going, but luckily the ground was frozen and you could go cross country. You could see a mercury vapor light, and you probably knew the area if there was a stream or anything like that, so you just head for that mercury vapor light and the farmer will come get you. That was a good storm. That's real.
But I remember snowstorms that were so violent and so deep, and we would sled down the roads because nobody was ever going to travel those roads.
I mean, some of my earliest memories just walking along the streets in Harford County as a small boy, early in the morning, heading off to church with my mother, who was the church organist, and snow drifts above my head, and just holding her hand, walking along an abandoned street at, I don't know, it must have been early, I don't know, I couldn't tell time at the time, moonlighting the street. So yeah, great memories of some pretty severe weather events, yes. Yeah.
I believe is maybe 94. I think I was in middle school. We had a very large snowstorm where it was the powdery snow and then the ice on top. And I have a picture of our family dog in the yard in Darlington on top of the snow crust. So she was kind of as high as the cars were.
I remember 1970 or so, they had a big snow flow, and it took me forever to shovel out the house, and kind of cool because all the people on the street would come out and shovel together, and we were more friends, so that was kind of fun. So.
And of course we had the blizzards back in 10 and 11 that dumped tons and tons of snow on us. But one of our most recent events was Winter Storm Elliott, with the high winds and deep cold freeze that happened over multiple days. From that, we had almost $30 million worth of losses that we are still processing today.
Harford County is just beautiful. When you look at Havre de Grace and the Susquehanna River and just the majestic views of that and where we're situated, it's just a wonderful place to be. You look at the museums and the gardens and all the things that are there in Harford County. It's just a wonderful place to be, a wonderful place to live.
I feel very blessed because I can look out of my window or any place and see grass, see trees. That's Harford County to me, being able to see the beauty of nature in Harford County.
The fact that it is a combination of the, small cities, but it also has this beautiful rural landscape, that to make a journey just to drive through parts of Harford County is inspirational in itself. And to go to any of the parks or those places where, for me, nature speaks to my spirit. So nature is, and we are preserving nature in many, many ways in Harford County.
It was wonderful to grow up in Harford County and just be in awe of everything that the landscape has to offer.
What I love most about Harford County is the land. It is the land, it is the water. It is the way of being like a mother. It is very easy to live here. And that's what I love about Harford County.
We may not have the Rocky Mountains, but we have the King and Queen Seat, and we have Falling Branch, and we have the beaches along the bay, and we're so very lucky to live in an area where we have all of those things.
I like that feeling of home, even when I was down in Florida. When the daffodils came out, I wanted to be back here in Harford County.
Home for me has always been Darlington area. It's pretty much everybody, or at least you used to.
There is so much that I can call Harford County my home for. I started my job here as a music teacher. I started my family here. My husband and I got married here. We got married up at the Geneva Farm Golf Course. So a lot of home things here. I had my children in Upper Chesapeake. So a lot of things to call home. And then of course, all the friends that I've met through my job and through doing music in Harford County. It's just a wonderful community.
And I actually made a choice to come home. I left home. I was making a life someplace else, and I thought, okay, I can make a life someplace else, and that could be very interesting. But I could come back to Harford County, and I could then settle into that multi-generational community. And you can't make that in a lifetime. You just can't. It's impossible. So to have that opportunity is something to treasure. When I look around Harford County, I feel at home. It is my home.
Well, I was born and raised here, so it's where I grew up, and so now, looking at it and raising my family here and seeing what we have here, we're at the top of the Chesapeake Bay. That's what I hold close to my heart.
I love the communities of Harford County. Each of them is very, very different. So the community atmosphere is striking, and it's still where you have your parades and you have your little ice cream stands. That's what I love about Harford County.
Walking along the promenade in Havre de Grace, I think with the water lapping at the promenade, and you pass people and all the families and the children are out, and everybody goes to the grill at the end of the promenade and has ice cream. Somehow that just seems kind of perfect to me.
Northern Harford County still has its bucolic qualities, and the rolling hills that I can see every morning when I get up give me inspiration and know that I'm where I ought to be. I'm home.
Harford County, happy 250th anniversary and many more.
So happy 250th anniversary, Harford County.
Wishing you all the best now and always, Harford County. Happy 250th.
Happy birthday, Harford County. Thank you.
Harford County, happy 250th anniversary.
Harford County, congratulations on your 250th birthday.
I just want to wish Harford County a wonderful, wonderful anniversary year. I'm excited at being part of the celebration and that we can remember that history is important and it's the foundation for what's going to come next.
Happy anniversary, Harford County. We love you.
So, Harford County, happy 250th birthday.
Well, happy 250th anniversary celebration of Harford County.
The Girls and Girls Night Out Jazz Band wish Harford County a happy 250th.
I love Harford County, Maryland. It's been good to me.